Hey everybody, and welcome to Volume 6 in my classical music CD collection series of videos where I take 15 classical music CDs out of my collection and go through them and show them to you and talk about them a bit and share my thoughts on them. And hopefully you've been following along so far, and also that you've subscribed so you get to hear when each video is released, and I hope you've been enjoying them. So anyway, let's just get started. We're going to start with this one, the first one. It's E. Power Biggs, the great organist, and he's playing Bach. Great organ favorites, played on the Flentrop organ in the Busch-Reisinger Museum, Harvard University. It's on the CBS Records Masterworks label, and it's got such favorites as the toccata, the great toccata and fugue, da-da-da, da-da-da-da-da, that one, and the toccata BWV 540, fugue, the jig, toccato adagio and fugue, BWV 564, the little fugue, BWV 578, the chorale prelude, BWV 720, chorale prelude, BWV 645, BWV 734A, and the great fugue, BWV 542, and the Passacaglia and fugue, BWV 582. So a great CD by, it sounds great, listened to it many times, by E. Power Biggs playing Bach's favorite organ pieces. Next we've got a CD by the great French composer who lived well into the 20th century, Maurice Ravel. I just listened to this again recently, and I've got to say, I had forgotten how great his piano concertos are. They're famous, but they're really great. I was actually reading a bit on Ravel recently because he had come to America and he met with the great American composer and pianist George Gershwin, and he was very, very taken with Gershwin and his music. Turn jazz influenced Ravel. George Gershwin actually asked Ravel to give him some lessons, and Ravel said, just keep doing what you're doing, because if I give you lessons, you'll just write bad Ravel instead of writing good Gershwin. So anyway, I listened to this recently and I really enjoyed it. It's a digital recording, the Ravel piano concertos on Deutsche Grammophon with Martha Argerich and Michel Beroff, and the London Symphony Orchestra conducted by Claudio Abbado. And you can see that Maurice Ravel lived from 1875 to 1937. And there you go. You probably know Ravel's Bolero, that's a very famous piece of music, as well as other great things that he wrote. But definitely check out the piano concertos if you're interested in this composer. Next we've got Brahms Piano Concerto No. 2 by the Atlanta Symphony Orchestra with Peter Serkin and Robert Shaw. I'm not really sure who Peter Serkin is. I have heard of Rudolf Serkin, who was a great pianist, and so I'm assuming this person is related to them, although I'm not sure. Anyway, it's on the Pro Art label, and New York Times wrote, Serkin must be counted among the ranks of our great pianists. And New York Magazine wrote, he is the finest pianist this country has yet produced. Wow, that's pretty saying something. I'm not really sure about that, but he might be. There's a picture of him in the middle. Could very well be. We've got Carl Flesch and Jeno Hubay, the HMV Recordings. These are very, very historical musicians, and these are very historical recordings. HMV obviously stands for His Master's Voice, which was a very popular, because you know that dog that's sitting in front of the Victrola and he's listening, because he's listening to his master's voice. That's where that comes from. A little trivia for you. We've got a whole bunch of stuff on here. Original works by Hubay, as well as Bach, Handel, and Paganini, Fauré, De Falla. You've got Otto Hurst and Ignaz Strasfagel on piano here. So, here we go. Let's open it up and try to find out. Interesting photos. Moving right along, we've got the French pianist, more recent, who's still active, Jean Thibaudet, playing Chopin's 24 Preludes, Opus 28, as well as 3 Nocturnes. It's on the Denon label, okay? And you can see the Preludes there as well as the Nocturnes. And a lot of music, and there's another picture looking very French of Thibaudet on the Denon label. We've got the Japanese pianist Midori playing Paganini's 24 Caprices on the Sony Classical label. She, I remember she was very, very famous. I haven't really heard much of her now. I assume she's still active, from Japan. 24 Caprices for Solo Violin Opus 1 by Niccolo Paganini, who was a virtuosic violin player lived from 1782 to 1840. So he had 1 foot in the 18th century and 1 foot into the 19th century. Sony Classical. Here's another great CD under Great Recordings of the Century, and the Great Recordings of the Century were sort of milestone recordings that are well loved and well preserved. It's Yehudi Menuhin playing Beethoven and Mendelssohn's violin concertos with the Philharmonia Orchestra and the Berlin Philharmonic, conducted by Wilhelm Furtwängler on the EMI label. It's a violin concerto in D major, Opus 61, and Mendelssohn's violin concerto in E minor, Opus 64 on the EMI label. Here's another historical recording. Bronislaw Huberman in performance playing Mozart's violin concerto in D Kurschel 218 and Tchaikovsky's violin concerto in D. Conducted by Bruno Walter and Eugene Ormandy. Next we have this beautiful CD of piano music of Brahms. I love Brahms, and I love his piano music as well as his orchestral music. Here's the Klavierstück, Opus 119, and the Fantasy, Opus 116, as well as the Intermezzi, Opus 117, played by Stephen Bishop Kovacevic. Itzhak Perlman, he overcame polio to be one of the greatest living violinists and one of the greatest violinists of all time. This is on the Deutsche Grammophon label. Itzhak Perlman's greatest hits, including the Carmen Fantasy. Let's see what else is on here. Carmen Fantasy, Saint-Saëns Introduction and Rondo Capriccioso, Lalo's Symphonie Espagnole, Saint-Saëns Havanaise, Chausson's Poème, Ravel's Tzigane, which means gypsy in French, Berlioz's Reverie and Caprice, on the Deutsche Grammophon label. We got Rudolf Kemp with Chopin's Piano Concerto No. 2, Fantasy in F minor, Polonaise No. 6 in A flat major, and Grand Polonaise, with Shura Cherkassky on the piano, conducted by Rudolf Kemp and the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra, on Historical Masterworks, Famous Conductors, on the Menuet label. We've got another CD on the Pearl archival label, which specializes in great historical recordings. This is Beethoven's Violin Sonatas, Volume 3, the Sonatas Opus 30, No. 3, and Opus 47, the Kreutzer Sonata. This is for violin and piano by Fritz Kreisler and Franz Rupp, the classic recordings of 1935. And there you have it, Fritz Kreisler on the violin and Franz Rupp on the piano, on the Pearl label. On Seraphim Classics, we've got Rimsky-Korsakov, the composer, a Russian composer, with his famous Scheherazade and Respighi's Fountains of Rome performed by the Philadelphia Orchestra with Riccardo Muti conducting. That's what that is. Next, we've got Bruno Walter with Beethoven and Mendelssohn violin concertos. Bruno Walter is the conductor, famous conductor. And the violinists are none other than Joseph Szigeti. We've seen him pop up in these CDs many times, as well as the great, great violinist Nathan Milstein. We've seen some stuff by him. We'll see more, no doubt, by the time this series is over. And the New York Philharmonic Orchestra. And finally, for this group of CDs, we've got the great violinist extraordinaire, master of the violin, Jascha Heifetz, playing Casteluovo-Tedesco Concerto No. 2, Ferguson and Khachurian Sonatas, and Francaix Trio. Heifetz with Dick Pasquale and Piatigorsky. I know Piatigorsky plays cello. I'm not sure what Di Pasquale plays again. Maybe it'll tell us on the back. Alfred Wallenstein, conductor. Di Pasquale is playing viola. Well, that just about does it for this volume 6 of the classical CDs in my collection. I hope you'd enjoyed it. As always, please subscribe, and I will see you on the next one. Bye now.